Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. I have a nice scented candle that smells like toasted marshmallows. It was a very hot day today. Got to like 94 degrees. Pretty horrible. I wish it could never get hotter than 70 degrees. I prefer the 60s, but that's just me. You know I like the snow. So, in this book, which talks about the biography of Uthman ibn Affan, there is a really cool point here where it talks about his method of governance and that he promised to rule with wisdom and patience. And then he gave this speech that I think that you'll find him to be a really good speaker, and hopefully you'll be inspired by it. It goes as follows. I have been given this responsibility, and I have accepted it. Note, I am a follower, not an innovator. In addition to following the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger, peace be upon him, I promise you 3 things. I will follow those who came before me in terms of what all of you agreed with and took as your way. I will follow what good people publicly took as their way. I will not punish you except when applying the prescribed legal punishments. This world is flourishing and attractive, and many people are inclined towards it, but do not rely upon this world, for it is not to be trusted. Know that it does not leave one unless he leaves it. Now, what's really interesting about that is he says here, not an innovator. So, with progressive Muslims, I've noticed they try to revise and edit out things, which is, I think, a form of innovation because you're reforming, changing the tradition. And so I found this quite interesting that a Khalifa, Caliph, the leader, would specifically say, like, I am not an innovator. And so this for us highlights how important it is to get down to the root of what is permitted and what's not, what's authentic and what's not. And then he continues here again that I will not punish you except when applying the prescribed legal punishments. So he's not going outside of the boundaries that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, peace be upon him, have set. So he just openly tells us that, and I found that to be quite unique. And I do agree with how he pointed out that the world is flourishing and attractive, and that many people are inclined towards it, but that we shouldn't rely upon it, and it's not to be trusted. Think about that. I just really found this interesting because flourishing and attractive. Flourishing is like when there's all these flowers in the garden blooming, when there's excess, when there's bulk, when there's plumes that have just sprouted. Flourishing is a very unique word. And attractive, because when something is flourishing and attractive, it's like, whoa, it calls you to it, right? And it inclines you towards it. So I found this quite interesting how he then noted it with don't rely upon this world. If something is flourishing and attractive, you can sometimes link yourself to it, depend upon it. And he warned us to not trust it. Not everything flourishes forever. Everything comes and goes. And if you look at the world around us, certain laws, certain people, certain institutions, you begin to realize, yeah, you can't trust everything. And you should be skeptical, and you should be mindful, and not overly rely on this world. It's quite the opposite message than what the atheists are told. Because to them, they're pure materialists. For them, this is it. This is the world they trust. They try to find out its secrets, and they trust those secrets. thinking there is nothing beyond, that they got it all figured out. They trust their own minds that can only perceive this world and can't perceive the next, and they link themselves up to it. And it's fascinating how he said, know that it does not leave one unless he leaves it. So to leave the world, to not trust it, to not rely on it, to not incline yourself towards it, and to not be lured and tricked by its flourishing and its attractiveness. He mentions later, I read ahead in the book, obviously, I'm going in order for you, though, fam, that luxury, excessive luxury, makes the soul lazy and lethargic, and takes away one's vigor. And when you combine what he said then with this here, you begin to realize how it's really wrong how feminist hijabis will shame stay-at-home mothers, thinking they're better than the women who put family first. Because some women can give up things and nurse and be with their child and do the best for their child for at least 2 years. You can, actually 3, 9 months pregnancy, 2 years of with the little one nursing and stuff. But some people don't want to let it go because they incline themselves towards the validation that the university set. They incline themselves towards seeking the approval of the secular liberal atheists in their ivory towers, who look down upon mothers, stay-at-home mothers, with a condescending tone of primitiveness and plebeian type of narcissism. And so when you worship academia, like certain feminist hijabis, you then become to rely upon it for your worldly gain, because you're putting it before family. It's really quite interesting how it makes me think about how people who really try hard to chase money, I'm not saying you have to be a pauper, but when certain feminist hijabis say, do you want us all to be poor and be in a kebab shop? It's like, why would you say something like that? And especially if a feminist hijabi who has no children and doesn't have a husband, you're like, well, you've relied upon this world. You found that the certain academia is to be trusted for all knowledge, never to be questioned, worth the debt, and its flourishing classrooms and attractive architecture have made you think that's where the power lies. But if you leave that bond that they place upon you at the university campus, and you realize knowledge is throughout all this world, and you shouldn't be so arrogant and haughty and think you have nothing to learn from anyone who doesn't have a PhD, well, you can do better if you leave that mentality that is ingrained upon you. Because for the secular liberal atheists, they incline towards the world, they rely upon it because this is it for them. That's what they think. It's it for them. So when you're dealing with an empiricist materialist who's also nihilistic and cynical, they're not really going to guide you towards a spiritual abode. Rather, they're going to guide you towards the bank and paper diplomas and the coffee table of circle jerk narcissism. It is quite interesting. I like how he said that. I like it because you can't leave something until you recognize that it's not worth having. And so you can do well in the dunya, but don't become envious. Don't become hateful. It is quite interesting. Really quite interesting. He gave some good advice here. I like reading his speeches. And he also promised to follow the way of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar ibn al-Khattab, and to really apply everything he could in the prescribed legal punishments. And so he's going to uphold the law and order and rule with wisdom and patience, which is not easy to do. It's really not easy. So I hope you liked that. I know I did. It was in chapter 7, and it really makes you think. Ancient wisdom that still applies today.